Your Conversation Project Starter Guide: How to talk about what matters to you and have a say in your health care. If you don't have the Conversation Project Starter Guide in your hand, that's okay. I'm going to put it up on the screen, and later you can download the entire document from the conversationproject.org. And then you can print that out and you can fill in the blanks of the questions that are asked to you. And the first words of the starter guide are these: we can't plan for everything, but we can talk about what is most important in our life and in our health care with those who matter most. Talking with the important people in our life can bring us closer together. It also helps us create the foundation of a care plan that is right for us, a plan that will be available when the need arises. The Conversation Project wants to help everyone talk about their wishes for care through the end of life, so those wishes can be understood and respected. We created this guide to help you start a conversation and keep talking so you can have a say in your health care today and tomorrow. Now, before going into the guide itself, I want to give you a little bit of a background. My name is Charles Eaton, and I'm a psychologist and clergyman who came out of retirement 2 years ago at age 86 to serve as a psychologist and chaplain for a palliative care hospice physician and team. And I have found that this Conversation Project Starter Guide to be an extremely important aid, and so will you. Now, if you were to go to the main page of the Conversation Project home site, you would find this background, which I read. It began in 2010 when Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Ellen Goodman and a group of colleagues concerned media, clergy, and medical professionals gathered to share stories of good deaths and hard deaths within their own circle of loved ones. And they shared stories of those that they knew who, in one way or another, had been able to live life fully until the end, and others, with a variety of circumstances and reasons, had lives that were tragically diminished at the end. And what made the difference? For many people, part of it seems to include a clear awareness of what has been important in their lives, what matters most to them now, and what will matter to them even to the end of their days. Ellen Goodman founded this nonprofit after serving as caregiver to her mother, who had Alzheimer's disease for many years. She and her mother had never discussed end-of-life issues. But in the end, the care decisions fell to Ellen. Now I'm going to read in her own words what she says about this, because it's just fascinating. She said, "My mom was one of those people who could talk about your problems until you were bored with them. We talked about everything except one thing: how she wanted to live at the end of her life. Once or twice, when we heard about a relative or friend who was comatose or on a feeding tube, she would say, 'If I'm like that, pull the plug.' But of course, when the time came, there was no plug. In my mom's last years of life, she was no longer able to decide what she wanted for dinner, let alone what she wanted for medical treatment. So the decisions fell to me. another bone marrow biopsy, a spinal tap, pain treatments, antibiotics. I was faced with cascading decisions for which I was wholly unprepared. After all the years I had written about these issues, I was still blindsided by the inevitable. The last thing that my mom would have wanted was to force me into such bewildering, painful uncertainties about her life and death. I realized only after her death how much easier it would have been if I heard her voice in my ear as these decisions had to be made. If only we had talked about it. So I never want to leave the people I love that uneasy and bewildered about my own wishes. It's time for us to talk. It's time for us to talk. Helen Goodman and her mother had never discussed end-of-life care, but, as she said, in the end, the care decisions fell to her. Over several months, with a group that she had assembled, a vision emerged for a grassroots public campaign spanning both traditional and new media that would change our culture. The goal to make it easier to initiate conversations about living and dying and to encourage people to talk now and as often as necessary so that their wishes are known when the time comes. To make that vision a reality, the Conversation Project began its collaboration with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement in September of 2011. IHI is a not-for-profit organization that helps lead improvement of health and healthcare throughout the world. More than 1,500,000 people have visited the Conversation Project website since its 2012 launch, and more than 550,000 people from all 50 states and more than 160 countries have downloaded the Conversation Starter Guide, which is available in English, Arabic, French, German, Haitian Creole, Hebrew, Hindi, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, and Vietnamese, who knows what else. And now it is your turn. I'm going to comment about a number of things, but I'm also going to read the starter guide almost word for word. So if you haven't downloaded your free copy, that's all right. We're just going to walk through this as an introduction, and you'll want to have significant time in thinking about your responses to the various topics that are raised. And then, so we turn to page 2. I've already read the first part of that in introducing it. At the bottom it says, "We will help you take it step by step. You can take your time. There's no need to say everything that matters in one conversation. You can start talking, then keep thinking. It's all about what works best for you." And then it says, step 1, thinking about what matters to you. Step 2, plan your talk. Step 3, start talking. Step 4, keep talking. Then page 3, think about what matters to you. To get ready to talk about what matters to you and your wishes for care through the end of life, it's helpful to gather your thoughts as a first step. You don't need to have the conversation just yet. Here are some helpful ways to think about what matters to you and prepare you for your conversation. What does a good day look like to you? Well, of course, the answer to that depends on where you are in your life now and through the end of your life. And it's difficult to compose the questions that are in this guide. What would be a good day for you? But it's worth thinking about. They suggest some ideas. Is it time with family and friends? Is it enjoying everyday activities? And what do you need to enjoy a good life through the end of life? That's going to be the subject for this entire guide. What or who supports you during difficult times? And they suggest as some ideas your faith, your culture, your family, your friends, your pets. And I'm going to ask, as you're thinking about these things, when the really, really difficult times have come upon you and you faced terrific problems, what were the things that helped you get through them? Was it a particular stance that you took toward life when there were things that you couldn't change? Was there ever a time that the difficulties became so great? Well, we might as well speak of extreme things because we're talking about life and death all the way through. Was there ever a time in your life when things were so difficult that perhaps you actually thought about giving up on life? And if that did come to such a crisis, what was it that got you through it? It's important for you to think about this and to remember the ways in which you got past the really difficult times, because there will come difficult times in the future for you. So what those resources were, what the strengths were that you had or that you were given or by which you were supported, you're going to write them down when you come to writing. Now, the next step, try finishing this sentence. What matters to me through the end of my life is... that's the big question. And for ideas, they suggested being able to recognize my children, being independent, being able to spend time with those I love. And then they point out with an arrow even, that's your what matters to me statement. And they go on to say, sharing it with people you trust could be a big help. If they need to communicate with your health team one day, they may need to share what's important to you and what you need to be able to have a good day. They also may need to decide what type of treatment you'd want to receive. Completing this guide will help you refine what you want them to know about what matters to you. Now, this is such an important issue, the what matters to me statement, that I would like to read something that one of the experts that is on the team, Dr. Atul Gawande, wrote in the Annals of Medicine for August 2nd, 2010. And the title of his article for the Annals of Medicine was Letting Go. What should medicine do when it can't save your life? Now, this is directed to physicians. It is. But it is really important for you and for me to think about. By the way, Dr. Atul Gawande is the author of the very popular book, and I hope you get a chance to read it, Being Mortal and What Matters in the End. What matters in the end is the whole question of this study guide. So in this article, he says, Dr. Susan Block, a palliative care specialist, has a list of items that she aims to cover with terminal patients in the time before decisions have to be made, what they understand their prognosis to be, what their concerns are about what lies ahead, whom they want to make decisions when they can't, how they want to spend their time as options become limited, what kind of trade-offs they're willing to make. 10 years ago, her 74-year-old father, Jack Block, a professor emeritus of psychology at the University of California at Berkeley, was admitted to a San Francisco hospital with symptoms from what proved to be a mass growing in the spinal cord of his neck. She flew out to see him. The neurosurgeon said that the procedure to remove the mass carried a 20% chance of leaving him quadriplegic, paralyzed from the neck down. But without it, he had a 100% chance of becoming quadriplegic. The evening before surgery, father and daughter chatted about friends and family, trying to keep their minds off of what was to come, and then she left for the night. Halfway across the Bay Bridge, she recalled, "I realized, oh my God, I don't know what he really wants." He'd made her his health care proxy, but they had talked about such situations only superficially. So she turned the car around. Going back in was really uncomfortable, she said. It made no difference that she was an expert in end-of-life discussions. I just felt awful having the conversation with my dad. But she went through her list. She told him, "I need to understand how much you're willing to go through to have a shot at being alive, and what level of being alive is tolerable to you." We had this quite an agonizing conversation where he said, and this totally shocked me, "Well, if I'm able to eat chocolate ice cream and watch football on TV, then I'm willing to stay alive. I'm willing to go through a lot of pain if I have a shot at that." I would never have expected him to say that, Block went on. I mean, he's a professor emeritus. He's never watched a football game in my conscious memory. The whole picture. It wasn't the guy I thought I knew. But the conversation proved critical because after surgery he developed bleeding in the spinal cord. The surgeons told her that in order to save his life, they would need to go back in. But he had already become nearly quadriplegic and would remain severely disabled for many months and possibly forever. What did she want to do? I had 3 minutes to make this decision, and I realized he had already made the decision. She asked the surgeons whether, if her father survived, he would still be able to eat chocolate ice cream and watch football on TV. Yes, they said, and she gave the okay to take him back into the operating room. If I had not had that conversation with him, she told me, my instinct would have been to let him go at that moment because it just seemed so awful, and I would have beaten myself up. Did I let him go too soon? Or she might have gone ahead and sent him to surgery, only to find, as occurred, that he survived only to go through what proved to be a year of very horrible rehab and disability. I would have felt so guilty that I had condemned him to that, she said. But there was no decision for me to make. He had decided. During the next 2 years, he regained the ability to walk short distances. He required caregivers to bathe and dress him. He had difficulty swallowing and eating. But his mind was intact, and he had partial use of his hands, enough to write 2 books and more than a dozen scientific articles. He lived for 10 years after the operation. This past year, however, his difficulties with swallowing advanced to the point where he could not eat without aspirating food particles, and he cycled between hospital and rehabilitation facilities with the pneumonias that resulted. He did not want a feeding tube, and it became evident that the battle for the dwindling chance of a miraculous recovery was going to leave him unable ever to go home again. So, this past January, he decided to stop the battle and to go home. We started him on hospice care, Dr. Block said. We treated his choking and kept him comfortable. Eventually, he stopped eating and drinking. He died about 5 days later. Dr. Gawande continued, Susan Block and her father had the conversation that we all need to have when the chemotherapy stops working, when we start needing oxygen at home, when we face high-risk surgery, when the liver failure keeps progressing, when we become unable to dress ourselves. I've heard Swedish doctors call it a breakpoint decision, a systematic series of conversations to sort out when they need to switch from fighting for time to fighting for the other things that people value, being with family or traveling or enjoying chocolate ice cream. Few people have this discussion, and there is good reason for anyone to dread these conversations. They can unleash difficult emotions. People can become angry or overwhelmed. Handled poorly, the conversation can cost a person's trust. Handled well, they can take real time. And then, from the book that Atul Gawande wrote called Being Mortal, he said, "In medicine, when we are up against unfixable problems, we are often unready to admit that they are unfixable. But I learned that it matters to people how their stories come to a close. The questions that we ask one another just as human beings are important. What are your fears and worries for the future? What are your priorities if time becomes short?" Now, you'll recognize that these issues have to do with eating chocolate ice cream and watching football on television. It has to do with the things that are important for you. What would you be willing to give up for a longer life? What things would you not give up even for a little more life? At a talk before students at the Harvard Theological Seminary, Dr. Gawande was asked what his minimum requirements for life would be before giving up. You want to hear that, right? He said that he'd be okay if his brain was put in a jar and was wired up in some way as to be able to have interactions with others. He said that his wife, Kathleen, thinks that this is crazy. Kathleen said that she wouldn't mind being able to give up interactions with others as long as she had some element of joy in her life. If Atul could not detect joy in her, then she would be willing to go. The title of Dr. Atul Gawande's book is Being Mortal and What Matters in the End. What is it about? It's there in the title. It's about what matters in the end and the difficulty of weighing our competing desires for quality of life and length of life. So now we turn to page 4. Step 2, plan your talk. Having a say in your health care is more likely if you share how you feel about certain situations that could arise now, in the future, and toward the end of life. For each statement below, mark the place on the line that is closest to what you think or believe about each statement now. There are no right or wrong choices. Your answers are about what works for you. The first, as a patient, I'd like to know, and then you have these choices. You have 5 little things that you can mark. As a patient, I'd like to know only the basics about my condition and my treatment. And then way at the other end of the choices, as a patient, I'd like to know all the details about my condition and my treatment. Now, those are extreme positions. And it's very likely that you're going to find yourself toward the middle in some place or other. But it's very important to consider in your own mind way before you get to that point. The next one. When there's a medical decision to be made, I would like, then on the left, I would like my healthcare team to do what they think is best. And then on the other extreme, I would like to have a say in every healthcare decision. Now you're going to have to think about these things carefully, and you will modify as you go along. You change your mind a little bit, but keep on thinking and writing. Next, what are your concerns about medical treatments? On the one side, I worry that I won't get enough care. And then on the opposite one, I worry that I'll get too much care. And then, if I'm diagnosed with a serious illness that could shorten my life, I would prefer to, and then one side, not know how quickly it is progressing or my doctor's best estimation of how long I have to live. And then on the other side, understand how quickly it is progressing and my doctor's best estimation for how long I have to live. Now, I'd like to make a few comments about that as you're thinking about what decision you would make there. It won't surprise you if I tell you that statistically it's been demonstrated that if you ask the physician the best estimation of how long you're going to live, if you know that physician well, the estimation is going to be more rosy than if you didn't know the physician at all. Well, that shouldn't be a surprise. Nobody understand that. But there's something else you'll understand as soon as I point it out to you, and that is that statistics are always a kind of a bell curve, you know. Most of the outcomes are in the big, large part of the top there, but some of them are way on one side or the other side. In other words, some people with this condition will die very soon, and others will exist for a long, long, long time beyond the average. So we urgently desire and feel that we need to know how long we have, but statistics are really not going to help us too much. And I want to share with you something that a professor of oncology here at the university said some years ago. He said, most of my patients, perhaps all of them, whether they mention it or not, really want to know how long they have to live. And I tell them that with the condition that they have right now, it's advisable that they consider what must be done now before the end comes. But I also tell them that they will know when the end is near before I do. They will know when the end is coming near before anyone on the medical staff does. And why would that be? It is because toward the end, your body itself will be alert to when things begin to fail. And the fact of the matter is that in most terminal cases, well, especially if he was talking about cancers, there will be a failure of one organ, and then there'll be a cascading failure of organs. And he said, I say to my patients, if you wake up in the morning and feel you're going to make it through the day, you're going to make it through the day. Now, are there any other notes you want to add? These have been major questions, and you've heard a lot of options and discussions. Write down the notes you want to add, and then come back later and jot down some more notes. Next, if you were seriously ill or near the end of your life, how much medical treatment would you feel was right for you? Again, you have those 5 little dots on the extreme left. I would want to try every available treatment to extend my life, even if it's uncomfortable. And then on the other side, I would not want to try treatments that impact my quality of life in order to extend my life. Those are the big questions. You've got it right there. You'll be coming back to this many times. The next question, where do you prefer to be toward the end of life? On the one extreme, I strongly prefer to spend my last days in a healthcare facility, hospital, assisted living, or nursing facility. And then on the other hand, I strongly prefer to spend my last days at home. Now this decision is going to be different. It's not going to be the same for me as it is for you. But it really means that it's important to consider that question. Next, on page 6, we have this question. Now look at your previous answers. What do you notice about the kind of health care you said is right for you? Now they give you a pretty big piece of paper to write on, because it's an important question that you need to address, and you can do that. And then we go on. If you weren't able to speak for yourself, would you want people to follow all your wishes, or do what they think is best in the moment? And the two extremes are, I want the people I trust to do exactly what I've said, even if it makes them uncomfortable. Or, I want the people I trust to do what brings them peace, even if it's different from what I said. It's a wide difference between those two positions. And then, when it comes to sharing information about my health with others, on the one side, I don't want those close to me to know all the details about my health. And on the other side, I am comfortable with those close to me knowing all the details about my health. I remember receiving a letter from a woman. It was an annual letter, and she sent it out to all of her friends and relatives, and she said, "Please don't ask me how I'm doing. The fact is, I am dying, and I only want to respond to questions like that with my husband and my physician." Pretty straightforward. So you have to think about that as what you want people to know and what you prefer to be private about. Then, when I die, on the one side, I want to be alone. On the other side, I want to be with other people. I want to assure you that this can change the closer you come to the end of your life. For many, many people, it happens that although they really appreciate being surrounded by their family and friends, that when it comes actually to the end, they feel a great desire to be alone. And because that's true, it's appropriate to say to your friends and your family, look, I've been told by the healthcare team that it might be a time coming soon when, well, either I want to be alone or only with one or two of you, and I don't want you to feel shut out when I say it's been a great party, but I don't want the crowd around at the last moment. Now we have page 7. What specific information would you want or not want shared with certain trusted people? And then, down the page, look at your previous answers. What are the most important things for your friends, family, and healthcare team to understand about what matters most to you through the end of life? You and I don't want to make the mistake of, for one reason or another, not letting people know what really is important to us. Step 3, start talking. How much do the people who matter to you know about what matters most to you? There may be some things they already know and other things that you need to tell them. Sometimes we might think others know how we feel, but they don't. Conversations help make what we think and how we feel as clear as possible. Who needs to know what matters to you in your health care? Check all that apply. And there's a lot of them. Parents, spouse, partner, chosen family members, adult, child, or children, faith leader, minister, priest, rabbi, imam, etc., trusted friends, doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses, social worker, and other. And I'm sure that there will be other. Where would you feel comfortable talking? And they have these options that they think about: at the kitchen table, at a favorite restaurant, in the car, on a walk, video chat or phone call, at my place of worship, other. Now, I would like to suggest to you that the place, the place where you would be comfortable talking, is likely to vary from person to person. There are going to be some that the kitchen table is the place. There are some that you'd like to take out to a restaurant. Talking in the car for some people is a good place to be for a couple of reasons. One is you're both facing in the same direction and not looking directly at each other. So there's a kind of intimacy by being close in the car, and also a little tiny bit of distance. The next one, on a walk, I want to address that also. Let's say that there's someone in your family that is likely really to be distressed about this situation, and even distressed about some of your decisions, some of the things that you value. They might really not agree with it. And there is a certain something about a walk. You find some place that is as private as possible, a park or something like that, and you walk and you talk about the decisions you want to have, and you listen carefully to their responses, and then you will realize, you will feel the time has come finally that there either has become some kind of an agreement or there won't be, and now it's time to turn around and walk back. And this walking back process, there's a strange chemistry that goes on when both of you realize that it's coming to an end. That is to say, the discussion is coming to an end. The attempt to understand each other and either to agree or not, and finally the whole thing is concluded and you come back, and then you can go to the kitchen, you can join the other friends or the restaurant or whatever it is. Now, the last thing on page 8, the Conversation Project uses the saying, "It always seems too soon until it's too late." That is to say, we think there's plenty of time to have discussions in regard to what matters most to us in regard to the end of our life, and until there isn't time. And so the question is, when will you start this conversation? And so you're asked to write down in black and white, or whatever color pen you have, when you're going to do this, which means that you have, in some sense, made a commitment. You've put it down there, and you're going to do it. Page 9, you've gathered your thoughts, written down your ideas, and picked your trusted people. Now, how do you begin a conversation? And then there's a list. This list doesn't cover everything, but here are some things you can say to start talking. I need your help with something. Can you and I have a conversation about, I was thinking about what happened to so-and-so, and it made me realize Even though I'm okay right now, I'm worried that, and I want to be prepared. Can we talk about some things that matter to me? Will you help me think about my future? I heard about the Conversation Project and answered some of their questions about things that matter to me when it comes to my care through the end of life. I'd like to talk to you about it. When so-and-so died, do you think their wishes and priorities were respected toward the end of their life? And here's a list of some other things you may want to cover when you talk. Do you have any worries about your health? What do you need to address to feel more prepared? Example, finances, property, legal documents, relationships, healthcare situations. Do you have any fears, concerns, or mistrust about where or how you'll receive health care? Who do you want or not want to be involved in your health care? When you look ahead to the future, are there important events or dates you hope you're there for? I've got to tell you, it really does happen when people have a goal. We want to be still around when a grandchild is born or whatever. It makes a difference in the way they face their ending of their life. And sometimes they live a whole lot longer than they would have expected to live. Are there kinds of treatment you would want or not want? Examples, resuscitation attempts, ventilation, feeding tube. If your health care changed, when would it be okay with you to shift from trying to cure an illness to trying to enjoy the end of life as much as possible? And then page 10, tips for your talk. Imagine your conversation in your mind first. You can even write a letter that explains your values about the kind of care that works for you, and figure out words that feel comfortable for you to use. Now that might sound like a strange idea to you, writing a letter. Who writes a letter to themselves? Well, it is a really, really good exercise. You're not going to mail it to yourself. You are yourself. But you write a letter to yourself, dear self, now that I'm coming to the end, and you begin to write down some of the things that you've been thinking about during this whole process that we've had together. And for some people, it can be a great deal of help. You can also consider having a practice conversation so you feel as prepared as possible to having a real conversation. You don't have to talk about everything or talk to everyone in the first conversation. In fact, we suggest you keep on talking over time. Be patient. Some people are nervous or may need time to get ready to talk. Every time you start a conversation, it helps you come closer to making your wishes fully known. Keep trying. You don't have to lead the whole conversation. It's important to also listen to what the other person says so that you can build trust. Nothing you say is permanent. Some people don't believe that. They think if they said it once, well, you've got to stay by that. No, not in this kind of situation. You can always change your mind as things change in the future, and they will. You may find out during these conversations that you and your trusted people disagree. That's okay. No judgment. The important thing is that you're talking now and to keep talking so you're prepared in case your health changes. You can share this guide with or without your thoughts included with your trusted people. Then page 11, step 4, keep talking. Now that you've started the conversation, keep going. Talk to more people who may have a say in your health care. The more you talk, the more people you are close to will know what matters to you. And that makes it more likely that you'll get the kind of health care you want now and through the end of life. Here are some things you can think about to keep the conversation going. When would be a good time to talk? And then they have some ideas here. It's a good idea to have another conversation when life changes happen, such as the birth of a baby, when family and friends are together for a holiday or visit, before a trip, or when a health issue is getting harder to manage. And you can think of other conditions that would have the same effect. What might you want to repeat or explain again, so you're sure your trusted people understand what's important to you? You think you know what I meant, but what you don't realize is that what I meant isn't exactly what I said. That's the communications always get garbled up one way or another, and that's the reason that we repeat the conversation in different ways and at many times with these important people. Who do you want to talk to next time? Are there people, such as family members who may disagree, who should hear things from you at the same time? What do you want to make sure to ask or talk about next time? Or actually, to repeat, sort of for emphasis, or so that they really get the message. The last page, number 12, unnumbered. What to do next? Now, it's a good idea to record your conversation with an important legal document to be sure your choices are followed. This is called an advance directive, or an advance health care directive. It has two parts. First, your health care proxy. This is the part of the advance directive where you name the person you have chosen to make health care decisions on your behalf if needed, as well as an alternate if your first choice is unavailable. As explained in this guide, be sure to have a conversation and keep talking with these people to be sure they understand what matters to you. You can find more information and suggestions in our Guide to Choosing a Healthcare Proxy. Number 2, your living will. This is the part of the advance directive where you describe your preferences and wishes for your health care if you cannot speak for yourself. There are many of the same things that you have thought about and discussed throughout this guide. Every state and most countries have their own advanced care directive forms. In the United States, the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization can help you find the right forms in your state. It's important to share your advance directive with more than your proxy alone. For example, if you pick an adult child to be your proxy and have other children, they should be aware of what matters to you in your health care and know whom you have chosen as your proxy. Talk to anyone who can help you have a say in your care through the end of life and provide copies of your advance directive to anyone who may need them. If you want tips on talking about what matters to you with your healthcare team, visit our Guide for Talking with a Healthcare Team. It's a good one. Now, I'm going to put the internet site on the screen, which you can get exactly the right advance directive for your state. If you were just to Google advanced care directive for Texas or Michigan or whatever, wherever you live, you'll get a page after page after page that offers these documents free. And they are free, but they're put up by sites that have additional ways to help you. All legitimate, I presume, lawyers, healthcare sites, AARP, lots of places. But with this site on the screen, you will get exactly what you want and nothing more. And once again, why are these grim choices so important? Well, as Ellen Goodman has said on many occasions, the best inheritance you can leave for those who follow is clarity about what you want in the end. But there's actually more. In every state, it is a law that ambulance personnel may not make decisions of life or death unless there is incontrovertible evidence that extreme measures should not be taken, such as an advance directive. That's explicit. Or equally specific is a bracelet like this one, which is engraved, "Do not resuscitate." Now, here's the advance directive for the state of New Mexico as an example. These documents are so extremely important that I'm going to go through it step by step. New Mexico Advanced Health Care Directive, page 4 of 8. This is the key part. If you are satisfied to allow your agent to determine what is best for you in making end-of-life decisions, you need not fill out this part of the form. If you do fill out this part of the form, you may cross out any wording you don't want. And we begin. End-of-life decisions. If I am able to make or communicate decisions regarding my health care, and if I have an incurable or irreversible condition that will result in my death within a relatively short time, or if I become unconscious and, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, I will not again regain consciousness, or if the likely risks and burdens of treatment would outweigh the expected benefits, then I direct my healthcare providers and others involved in my care to provide, withhold, or withdraw treatment in accordance with the choice I have initialed below. And here's where you can initial. I choose not to prolong life. I do not want my life to be prolonged. Or, I choose to prolong life. I want my life to be prolonged as long as possible within the limits of generally accepted healthcare standards. Or, I choose to let my agent decide. My agent, under my power of attorney for health care, may make life-sustaining treatment decisions for me. And then the last set of decisions, artificial nutrition and hydration. If I have chosen above not to prolong life, I also specify, by marking my initials below, that I do not want artificial nutrition, or I do want artificial nutrition. The next and the last, I do not want artificial hydration, liquids, or I do want artificial hydration. Well, you've been examining really difficult decisions, difficult for you and me, but almost impossible for those whom we leave behind if we do not give them clear instructions. And this brings us to the end of your Conversation Project Starter Guide, but there is one more thing I would like to attend to. You have been contemplating what matters to me questions, what matters to me toward the end of life. Now, I would like to direct your attention to what matters to you in the very last days of your life and how you approach the end. In my experience, I have been with some people as they were approaching death who were speechless and looked at me with white eyes wide open with fear. Not many, but they were there. And then there were others who died stoically, with clenched teeth, and some with bravado, with a deep determination to conquer death. And then there were some that were depressed and had a kind of a hopeless resignation, giving up life with a last gasp. But I would say that most have died with a certain composure. Neuroscientists say that in the last hour of life, our brains are flooded with neurotransmitters or chemical messengers that result in an unusual calmness. And in fact, it may be that you have actually seen this and noticed that while the living may be agitated by grief, there are times that those who are dying may actually have a relaxed calm. Now, in my experience, many of these also have a special form of composure that seems filled with something else, something that may not actually have a word that will express it. I wouldn't call it happiness, but there is often a kind of, a kind of radiance about them. And I've seen those who were near death smile even as their loved ones were weeping. I've heard people express gratitude for the gift of life, even as they were at the final pinnacle of life, with only hours left for them to enjoy it. Now, this is not a scientific or unbiased observation of mine, because for decades I have actively counseled people on this final journey of life. And among other things, whenever I meet them, I ask them to share a story of something really wonderful in their lives that they will never forget. What was the most gratifying gift that you ever gave anyone? Or what was the most gratifying gift that you received? A woman once said to me after I asked this question, "I can tell you that for sure. I was about 8, and it was toward the end of World War II, and I desperately wanted a doll. We were a family of little means. These were really hard times. We didn't have toys to speak of, and I knew that I was not going to get a doll. The only doll in our house was my sister's doll. It was a lovely doll, and she treasured it. I wanted one like that for Christmas. I really did. And then Christmas came, and there was a box wrapped with newsprint, and inside the shoe box, a gift to me, was my sister's doll. And then this woman spoke with strong emotions, and she added with a ringing voice, "And I still have that doll today. And my sister." Now, there's a memory for you. You've got memories like that. A friend of mine served several tours as a combat soldier in Vietnam, and he never talked about it. Never, ever. And then one day we were sitting on his cabin porch, and we weren't talking at all. We're just looking into the woods, I think. And I turned to him and I said, "What was the funniest thing that happened to you in Vietnam?" And he turned toward me, and he kind of cocked his head and looked with a quizzical way. And then he burst out laughing as if he would never stop. And he told me the story. You should have heard it. And then he told another one. This was a beginning, a great beginning. I remember another terminally ill man. I came to his room, and he said, "Oh, is it story time?" "Yeah, it's story time." And if I were to ask you in the next 10 seconds to pick any decade out of your life and think of something wonderful that happened then, 1001, 1002, 1003, for most of you, the stiff doors of your memory would kind of relax and open up, and perhaps gift you first with 1 or 2 important memories, and then, it often happens, then more and more. Sometimes I have to say to my neural messenger, "Hey, slow down, just one at a time." But what if you can't remember the good times? Or what if you can't remember at all? 2 of my friends old friends, good friends, died of Alzheimer's disease this past year. And for years I would phone them at least once a year and keep in touch as they declined. I talked with one friend who had dementia, and he said, "Good talking to you, but I will forget your name and who you are in minutes." And I said, "I know that. But I want you to know in this moment that we're talking together that I will hold you in my memory, and I am going to ask your wife to fill out cards and pin them where you can see them with the names of your friends and family who call to you and write to you." But maybe my memories will fade too. My mother and both of her brothers had increasing dementia as they approached death, and maybe that'll happen to me. Now, though, I have a moving screensaver on my computer, and it's filled with moving or sliding pictures, photographs of myself and my family, and I can see each image clearly in my mind's eye. And I hope to be able to do the same when my eyes close at the last. But if that is not to be, if I lose memory, I hope that at the least I may retain the feelings that these memories give me of love, of laughter, of life. And I would like to live for as long as I can feel the warm sensation of gratitude, of being grateful. It's bigger than words or language, but that's the closest word I can get to it. And I hope for you, whatever outcome is best for you, and I hope that you will keep the conversation going. Do it.